Hey, it's the Chief Bonding with Board Games, and this is a unpaid, so I'm saying unpaid, preview of Domination from Phalanx Games. So what is Domination? First of all, it is from a designer from Taiwan, I believe, Wei-Cheng. He's got quite a ludology, which I'll talk about in final thoughts. But Domination is all of World War II in 90-ish minutes. So some folks don't want to play all of World War II in 90 minutes, but I do believe he's captured a very interesting style and feel. Some things you'll see as we go in here, it has card drafting. So you're going to be getting cards and drafting them in, kind of like Sushi Go. You will also have a very quick card round or turn system where you're playing cards for operations. So your cards are driving that around. And you have a unique, at first odd looking board. Let me show you that board now.
All right, we're up over the map. So let's just look at the map for a little bit. It looks weird to me when I first look at it, but it's going to make perfect sense, and how everything lines up is very unique and different. First, just imagine all these geographical countries are on a globe, and that globe is flattened out. So right off the bat, you can see a few things. There's a color scheme. You're going to have red Russians, tan UK, gray is the Germans, and the lighter gray, not quite white because whites are neutral here. You can see a little white tank here, but the Japanese, they're more of a very light gray. The Germans are dark gray. Now I put the playing pieces down on the map just so you can see them, but I've got the plastic pieces down. In the game, they also sent these pieces that would come in, which are interesting. The squares are showing your land units, and the circles your fleet units, which corresponds with the spaces here. You will see that there are squares represented. Here's one right here. So your squares represent land, your circles will represent islands, and your octagons represent a coastal land area. Very important because it's going to matter where armies can move, fleets can move. Before we get into that, I'll also talk about, I'll throw in some pictures. The way you're going to move is going to be from major space to major space, and you'll be doing that via what the arrows will show you. A brown arrow will say that a army unit must be the first unit to cross into the next space, whatever it's connected to arrow-wise. But you'll also have blue units, which makes sense, be a water unit, a fleet unit. So you can see over in these island areas going on over here, you see a lot of blue to blue movement. You will see closer up, there's a lot of land movement going on in Russia. On occasion, you'll even have an asymmetric area where you'll be moving via land. One can move via water. So in every round or year of the game, you're going to have three phases. You're going to have a strategic phase, an action phase, and an administrative phase. So in the strategic phase, you'll be taking cards, and everybody's going to have a hand of cards. Sometimes some folks, depending on what's going on, so the Germans on the very first turn will have an extra card in their hand. It just shows some of the tactical advantages they had at different times, or whatever units have at different times in the war. But it's going to be a simple card drafting round. So you'll have a hand of cards in front of you, and much like Sushi Go or Fairy Tales, I'll pick a card. Again, sometimes that very first turn you may be taking two, but generally you'll take a card and then you will pass that deck to your opponent, depending on how many people are playing. Everybody has taken a card, and now after you've passed it, they'll take another one and the deck passes, and you'll take another one and the deck passes. So Sushi Go. Once you get around to the very last card that everybody's holding in their hand, those cards are all discarded. You now have the cards that everybody will be playing during the action phase. In the action phase, you'll be using those cards for either operations, which I'll come in and show, where you'll be attacking or moving or deploying new units. You'll have some technology, which I'll come in and explain a little bit better. There's events on the bottom part of the card, and there's even a Lend-Lease system, and you can simply pass. One of the very interesting things, and let me move this up, sorry, jerky, are the victory conditions are different for both factions. So in 1939, right over here, you can see that both Allies and Axis, if you can get to 32 points on your very first round in 39, you'll win. But after that, the Germans' victory conditions start dropping each year, and the Allies increase. So you've got to really be after it to be in each other's face as these victory conditions get harder for the Allies, but they get easier for the Axis. The other thing is 1945 comes around and it's a tie, a stalemate. The Axis wins, so it keeps you in each other's face. Let me show you a little bit more details on these cards and on the tech board. So the cards, I've got a photo up here now that you can look at. The upper left-hand corner looks like a ball-bearing circle maybe with a number associated. Those are your operational points that you can use to do everything from place down new units, move units, battle. The upper right-hand corner is technology. There is a technology board that I'll show you in a second that allows you to make movement or combat or building new units less expensive, and you can also make other improvements such as airstrikes and rockets and fleets of bombers. Then the bottom portion of the card will have a faction-specific area. So red, if I had a red card, would be something only the Russians could do with that bottom portion. It's generally something better than what the card would do on its own, but only the Russians would be able to use it. Or if it was tan, only the UK, or gray, only the Germans could use it. And that allows some specific types of things that would be, it's kind of abstract, but historically accurate. So you might see the Germans are able to perform some kind of blitzkrieg feeling type movement actions. Now, because it's card drafting, someone may decide, you know what, I'm pulling that card so that the German player isn't going to grab that. Excellent, excellent use of the card drafting. I want to point out too, the artwork on these pictures, the photographs that look colorized. It's a very nice choice. I enjoyed it. And it's an interesting, almost like Technicolor look. I've zoomed in on the tech board. So a couple things you can see is along the top, what you can see is what it would cost me to move a ground unit, what it would cost me to do battle with an opposing ground unit, and what it would cost me to deploy. So these three boxes would be how many operations points it would take. Same thing goes for my fleet over here. Then in the corner over here, you have rocketry, intelligence, and espionage. All right, so I'll show you how this works real quick. So you can see, oh, if I get it on there, there we go. So again, cool card. You can see the three elements that are going on here along with this great art. But over here is the tech area. Now, this card would actually be played for that tech. I would slide it under my tech board, and at the start of my strategic phase on the next turn, I would take a look at it, and I would be able to then adjust my tech track. So this is transportation, and I would be able to take my truck and show that I have this, or I like to move this up here. So I now have increased or decreased the amount of operational points it will take for me to move around on the board. So you can see now it would only cost one. If I were to develop these mobile artillery, I could reduce the amount of costs for me to do battle. And if I did some kind of building tech, I could reduce the amount of costs for me to deploy units. Now you can see on the board, I could get down and be doing the same with airstrikes. Airstrikes are going to allow me to attack instead of those that are adjacent. I could reach out 2 boxes or 2 locations away. So the same thing works with the fleets, where you're just going to develop tech, reduce the cost. You can increase your tech with some different air powers and things that are moving around on the board. You can get into your V1s and 2s and nuclear bombs, and the intelligence and the espionage allows some card interactions to take place. All right, I wanted to show how a battle will occur. So I've used a card for operation points. I've looked at my tech board to see how much that's going to cost me. I then can do a battle between the adjacent units. I attack, and this unit is removed as long as I paid the proper operational points. Now, the very next time it comes around to my turn and I can play a card, I could play, assuming nobody's moved into that area, the Germans haven't moved back in, I could play a card for the operation points, or maybe even my faction, depending on what I have. I then could move a land unit, assuming that's what I wanted to do, because it's brown and it's an arrow. I can move a ground unit across this territory. In this way, I'm extending and seizing victory points by taking different territorial sections. I want to make sure I maintain supply back to my supply areas. But the very interesting thing here is, so land, once I've moved a land unit in, this is part of a connection. So you can imagine if I had a connection coming across here, eventually I'm going to get to a C spot where I'm going to have an arrow that's blue. That means I have to have a fleet. Well, it's just the first unit that moves into that area. So now I could move a fleet down my line of supply, and if it ends up attacking a island area, circled space, just the first unit into that circled space would have to be a fleet. Makes perfect sense, because you can imagine, okay, my fleet goes in and controls the area. Of course, now I can bring in all kinds of ground troops to occupy and hold that area, or use it as a staging center to launch an island hopping campaign. Of course, I'd have to have a fleet go in first again, but then I could move up my troops. So it's a very interesting and elegant way to show how you have to have the combined arms. You also will have air units. Air units give you the ability that if I'd had an air unit here, it could have attacked 2 away, obviously giving you that reach that air units give you. Tactically, of course, as you move around the board, you want to seize the centers of productions for the other factions, break up their supply lines, and ideally, hopefully for you, to take their home areas away from them and gain those victory points. Let me pull out and I'll give some final thoughts.
All right, we're back. So Domination is based off of Wei-Cheng's other game, Mini World War II. This grows it a little bit bigger, changes a few things around. I've never played that first Mini World War II game, but of course this design, Wei says, is supposed to add in a lot of Euro-type elements to World War II, keep things tight and keep things broad. I think he pulled that off perfectly. The connections being paramount on if you're moving a fleet or an army unit into the next space, the way air power factors in. I personally like when you have cards that you can use for multiple things. Do I want to use the operations to do, again, multiple things? Move, attack, build new units. Do I want to use the tech that's there and place that down underneath and get that later? Am I going to be building on a tech tree so that I'm much leaner and efficient and many more units, but that's going to take a while? Or am I going to kind of stay away from that and just try to get this victory condition moving around and get there quicker by being very aggressive in movement? So lots of options, but you're using very straightforward things. The tech tree is not complicated at all. the way you're going to build on that tech, not complicated at all. The operations are very straightforward. It's all right there in front of you. Maintaining your line or chain of supply, that whole movement forward where the first unit in has to follow the rules of a fleet or an army, but after that you can move much more efficiently along the board as long as your route is not disrupted. The victory conditions that come in and how the Germans, boy, it gets a little easier as time goes by. That number's coming down. So it means there's going to be a lot of aggression going on within the game, battling back and forth. The tension's going to be ramped up. The Allies really have to push it. So Domination's going to be up on Kickstarter June 21st, if I remember correctly. Either way, it's going to be late June. Some things that Wei-Cheng's put out before. So, of course, this is based off of mini World War II. But I'm looking all the way back. I think he's got, what, 16 different games here. But if we even look back to 2010, he had Panzer Ace and a game called Growling Tigers, 800 Heroes. So it's nice to have a new, although to me, a new designer to me, up in getting, you know, the treatment from Phalanx. But I'm very interested. I love how for me in particular, the card drafting worked in. Oh, and I didn't mention the faction portion on the bottom part of the card. That really adds that interesting layer in there, because part of the card drafting is man, this card's going to be great for the German player. It's okay for me because I can't use that specific faction power, but it does decent operations, or maybe it's got something I need in regards to the tech, but I definitely don't want my opponent to be able to use this card, so I've got to grab it. But again, you've got all those choices there because it's just maybe one of several cards. You know, if it gets passed, it's not going to come back to you, and maybe there's a better card you want. So you're stuck with that decision, not stuck with, you're blessed with that decision pattern of, do I take this card that's probably better for me, but is this card that's not quite as good for me but would be awesome for him? Is it worth me taking that in? And you don't know what else is coming your way. I love card drafting. I'm pleased that it's within this game. I think it makes things fast. It gets things interesting right away, that strategic phase. And you've got to have a general plan of what you're trying to do or craft as you're building at that phase. So it really models that idea of what is this country faction trying to do, or what are you trying to do with that country faction. Country faction? Sounds like I'm talking music here, but no. Faction. Chief, Domination, World War II in 90 minutes. It feels like it.